current wells to provide them with water. However, they will have somebody on staff that will be able to respond in a reasonable amount of time for water breaks. They had a water main break and had one of their maintenance workers trying to figure out how to shut the lines off, and it took them over 12 hours to get a contractor on site. Okay. With us, we'll have staff on site within 30 minutes and have a crew on site within 2 hours repairing the system.
Okay. Let me put it this way. I live in Caroline Pines.
Yes, sir.
If the county takes over the system January 2012, the county then expects me to give them a payment for connection fee, availability fee, whatever, but I still won't get water until June.
That's correct. You won't have county water. You'll still have water.
I mean, I won't have county water.
We'll be providing the service of making sure the system's running adequately and making sure the wells are running and checking the system, as well as going through and being able to start working on the wells of being able to put chlorination into some of the wells that are worth using that are down there.
Okay, so realistically, I'm not necessarily going to collect this $164,000, $165,000, whatever it is, right away because...
That's figuring 6 months of billing, sir. We would read the meter on January 1. We would take the first collection. Our billing would end the end of January, the last day in January. Right. We would send bills out by the 15th of the month, and your January bill would be due by the end of February.
Okay. What does it cost the county to get the water to them over and above what we're doing now?
Starting to operate the system as it is, we wouldn't be using any of the funds or any of the water supply from Caroline County at all. We'll be using their existing wells to be able to supply the water. The real cost is the manpower, the testing of the wells, the chlorination, and so on and so forth.
So that's what I'm paying for now.
That's what we would pay for, which is okay. Item number 10, which is to provide the position to be able to do that and operate that system, as well as installing the meters that need to be out there. We'd have to use that position as well as another staff member to do that.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah. You said they had a main break?
Yes, sir. They had their main break was actually caused by Comcast. You got to take the good with the bad, I guess. You know, as Comcast is coming in and putting in all these new lines, they had a main break. And one of the things that you worry about when you have a main break is to turn around and it depressurizes your system, which created a second main break. And the next day, Comcast hit the line a second time and created a third main break. They did go under boil water notices because of that, because they had contamination in their system. They had to flush their system heavily and had to do some chlorination. They don't actually have chlorination at their wells, but they were able to chlorinate their system and blow everything out and get some positive or not positive negative samples come back. So they're not on a boil notice anymore.
Well, let me ask you this. Do we know what kind of lines are in there? I think what they did.
When you say kind of lines, the type of lines?
Yeah, are they ductile iron? Are they?
No, there's no ductile iron at all in there. There is a small section of C900. Okay. There is some AWWA approved line. I would say a majority of the line is not AWWA approved. Some of it actually in one section and one leg is actually electrical conduit. That's something that the county's going to have to look at replacing. I do know that there is a road crossing that goes through a culvert pipe. That's something the county's going to have to look at replacing as we move forward. And that's part of, you know, the money that we've set aside out of there. We've got another plan that we're coming back, and as we had presented to the board, we had $250,000 that we had left in the budget to be able to do some of those upgrades and repairs that need to be done and to take care of the immediate things. Flushing valves are going to have to be installed. We know that. That's a thing that the health department's on them. Need flushing valves. Without flushing valves, there's no way to move water in the system. There's no way to flush out any sediments in there, and that creates an issue because they've got the same problem we do. They got high iron and manganese in their wells, and if you don't flush the lines, that sediment settles out, and eventually it stirs up in those lines and creates some pretty bad water.
Yes, sir. On the meters.
Yes, sir.
There's some cost savings there if we do them, isn't there?
That's correct. I think it was 3.5 years worth of salary we can pay in savings of that position that we're going to have whether we do the meters ourselves or have the contractor do it. So there's definitely a cost savings to hiring that operator and operating that system by doing that.
Okay. You had a question?
Yeah, I do. My concern is the fact that you've indicated we would collect for 6 months.
That's correct.
Additional $164,000, something thereabouts. My concern is having to pay $300,000 to collect that $160,000. Therefore, we have not come out on top. Is that the only break that you've had over there, or they have had over there in Lake Caroline Pines in recent months, is the one that Comcast caused?
Typically, they have between 3 and 4 breaks a year, depending on the weather. Your winter months are typically worse than your summer months.
When's the last one, what's the last one, or when was the last one they had prior to the one that Comcast caused? And I'm assuming Comcast paid for it?
I don't know, because one of the other problems that Caroline Pines has is they don't have anybody on staff to mark lines. So if the line was not marked and Comcast hit it, sorry for your luck, unfortunately. Miss Utility, you got a responsibility to respond. They don't have staff there, so somebody comes out once a week to mark Miss Utility lines, and if it's not done during that time, they don't get marked at all. So I know that they've been trying to locate that with some of their own maintenance staff. They're not water operators, don't really know where some of the lines are. They're kind of guessing. We think there's a water line here. They think there's one there.
When was the last time they had a break prior to that?
I believe it was the June time frame.
In June. What caused that one?
I mean, there was nothing that could be told. I mean, could have been deterioration. It could have been just the sediment of the line, or the settling of the earth around there. There was no really determination what caused it. The good thing is that if we take it over this time of year, it also helps us because it's typically the slower portion of the year for our utility system. As soon as we get into the summer months, we're into full swing, and we've got staff ripping and roaring up and down the roads, trying to maintain the system in general. And this gives us time to ease into that during a slower period, have the staff being able to go in and examine the system, start checking the system, and taking care of some of the issues that need to be taken care of during our slower time.
Did we not at one time talk about trying to reach an agreement with the Property Owners Association? Because we did reduce the availability fee down to a fee that's probably
$2,800 compared
right.
to $8,000.
It's 4, 5, 6 years old. Did we also not talk in terms of trying to reach an agreement with them, saying that they would pay a certain amount, or up to a certain amount, for any breakage that took place in the system in a 5-year period or 3-year period? And I don't recall the particulars, but I do know there was discussion about that particular issue.
There was, and we had actually talked about that and came back at the next board meeting, and the board decided that wasn't the path that they wanted to take at that time. One of the comments that was made is that we borrowed $3 million and we're only spending 2.1 on the project itself. There are additional funds.
We didn't know we were spending 2.1 until just recently.
That's correct.
So
but
I
that
don't
was
know
one of the
that discussion was ever had.
Well, the new discussion came up after that. We knew what the price was. It was at our July meeting when that took place, and we came back in the second July meeting there, and it was discussed then in closed session, and the board decided that we weren't going to pursue a separate agreement with them at all. Mr. Underwood, do you recall that?
My recollection was that you and I would talk to
That's
the
what I
homeowners
recall.
association.
That's right.
Was my last recollection of a meeting 3 or 4 meetings ago.
That's correct, yes, sir.
That's the last I had.
Yeah, that's
You
what I
have
recall.
not talked to
We
them
had
yet?
not, no.
It wasn't that we didn't want to do it, because we had borrowed $3 million and only spent 2.1. The fact was, we were going to allow you an opportunity to talk to the homeowners association and see if you could not reach some type of agreement. Again,
That's
I
right.
think that was the discussion.
Which it seems like we should still pursue that. In light of the breakages or whatever
Right.
that have recently happened. And you make great points in that, by us taking the system now, there's a possibility of additional funding or revenue coming in. We could help mark the lines. It also helps get you the water operator, which is number 10. All that's fine. And you basically presented your case for the water operator because you can save 3.5 years of salary. And that's basically the rule. To get somebody, you have to save some money. So you could do that, but I think part of, on the further side of the spectrum, I think there was some discussion that we were gonna make this a sanitary district.
There was some discussion of that,
So
yes,
that
sir.
everybody,
correct.
any problems within that district were the responsibility of that district, but the other side of that was any profit in that district stayed in that district. So we decided to not do that. But I thought as part of a win-win, if you'll say, we were gonna allow the property owners in Caroline Pines a very reduced connection fee in terms of them bearing some of the responsibility. So, you know, we provide water to them, their water's bad, we're doing all the work, but we shouldn't have all the liability if their pipes are bad.
That's
And I
correct.
think that was the real issue. So let's answer that question about if their homeowners association is willing to do that before I say I'm gonna connect in January or June.
And
That's my
this is in my district, Mr. Chairman, and, of course, I'm kind of torn, because I think we have an obligation to those homeowners who are, you know, experiencing difficulty. By the same token, there's a greater obligation to the county as well to make
Right.
sure that we're prudent with funding.
Right.
So I'm hoping they're understanding that, but we just want to make sure that we're doing the right thing and we cover all bases. So I think there should be some conversation first before we move forward on this.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure that staff was, and perhaps we should have been, but we were entirely clear on the board's direction on that. We'll coordinate with Mr. Underwood and get that underway and have that discussion.
Okay. And
Thank you, Joe.
I will not give you all of the responsibility. That probably should have come from the board too, and at least me. But to make sure, Mr. Underwood and Mr. Shebel are going to talk to the homeowners association at Caroline Pines. We're going to come to some agreement about their responsibility for existing pipes. When we have that existing agreement, we're going to come back to the board, present the board with what that agreement entails, and then we'll move forward based on that agreement for connection, time frame, revenue that comes to the county. Okay? And we'll also put agenda item number 10 in there in the same thing. If you're going to save us 3.5 years of salary and we hire this person, you got my vote to get that person. But I don't think we're going to give you that person now, not knowing what the story is with Caroline Pines, unless you have some compelling argument right now.
Yes, sir. I've got a few things that are concerned. One is I've got a minimum of 10 weeks. If I can get 10 meters installed in a day, which I think is pretty ambitious, trying to dig some of these up. Some of them we don't even know where some of the lines are, and trying to get 10 meters installed in a day. Right now we're looking at 10 complete weeks to get these lines put in. That's without without an employee taking a day off or an employee getting sick. A snow day that could happen between now and January 1, if the board took January 1 as an option, there's no way I could get that done. I also have a concern of trying to hire somebody even now in this time frame between now and January 1, going through the process of advertising. If we did have an internal candidate that was available, then you basically move someone up and you're still down a position that you got to fill, and going through that process, we could be 6-8 weeks. County administrators, quite a while. Directors taking a while to hire. So depending on how long it takes to hire a position, I do not have the staff to be able to dedicate to putting meters in without that position. I've already got to lose one person on staff now to help put these meters in, and then it was hopeful to have this other position to be able to do that. So the sooner I can start the hiring process, the better off I'm going to be. And that position is not going to sit idle. We've got plenty to do.
Okay. We're moving on to agenda item number 10. Is there any concern, issue for the board now of giving Mr. Shebel the authority to advertise for his position?
That is the issue that I have, is the fact that we haven't said that we're going to take over January 1.
Right.
And so I don't know that it's prudent on our part to take over January 1, to be honest with you.
Mr. Underwood, we're...
So I think we just need to wait until we determine, certainly, you know, Mr. Underwood and Mr. Shebel can certainly get with the Property Owner Association in Caroline Pines before the next meeting, or certainly before the first meeting in October. And
we
I
make a
think we
decision
can
then.
make a decision then on the entire package.
If I can remind the board also, January 1, we're going to have 4 new wells online. I've got to have staff going to every one of those wells, doing testing, delivering chemicals, recording the flows through those wells. I've got 2 new green sand filters that will be online. I've got additional testing that's got to be done at each of those on a daily basis. And on top of that, the additional sampling is a system because of those wells. So I do have increased items because of that as well that are going to take place January 1.
Stop selling. Stop selling.
Okay.
All right. Is there a problem with allowing Mr. Shebel to advertise, knowing that if he advertised tomorrow or started, he would definitely be in after the October 1 time frame, which we're going to at least make our decision by then. So is there a problem in letting him advertise? We're not giving him the authority to hire. We're just letting him advertise now. Is there a problem with that?
Mr. Chairman, I think we should go ahead and let him hire, and I talked to Mr. Shebel during the break, and particularly the utility department has been very prudent with their spending. I think they spent 79% of your budget this year, so I think they've done a good job.
That's partly because he was down a person.
Right. And well, again, it's still money.
That was only 2% of the budget.
It's still money that was saved, and yet we're asking them to do the same job.
Okay.
So.
You're saying hire?
I think we should consider.
Mr. Popowitz, hire or just advertise now?
Well, I think we need to at least advertise, because we're going to need somebody, like you said, he's got stuff coming up in January.
Right.
He's going to have a ton of people he's going to have people scattered everywhere. So
We just want to do the hire advertise. So you're saying
we can advertise.
just to advertise?
Advertise right now, and then if the next meeting we have another discussion, or the meeting after that, we can go ahead and
That's
at least
kinda what I was
discuss that.
I'll go with advertise. So will I.
Advertise? Okay. We're going to, by majority, we're going to advertise, and then we're going to look at, as soon as you come back with Caroline Pines, we'll try to hire, but we're expediting the process. So theoretically, you have the same authority now if we just said hire, because you wouldn't be giving us a candidate for some time. So go ahead and advertise. We're giving you the authority to advertise, and we are going to, so there's no confusion, we are going to expect you to come back with the list of candidates or have the candidates at the same time we're making the decision on when to take over Caroline Pines after you've talked to Mr. Underwood.
Now, our next meeting is only 2 weeks away. I do not have enough time to advertise, get it in the paper for the weekend, wait 2 weeks to be able to, at least 2 weeks. Typically, we advertise in the local paper as well as another paper.
Joey, you're sold.
I know, but it does take, the next meeting, I will not get it back.
But if we'd said hire, you'd still have that same problem.
Oh, that's correct.
So
Yes, sir. Well,
you
I'm
go
in the
right
same
ahead.
place. I'm
You
in
go
the
right
same
ahead and
place.
keep
Yes, sir.
going. Okay?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, if I could clarify, I just want to make sure I understand. The issue is not by authorizing the advertisement, I take it that we are authorized to hire the position at some point. The issue is the timing on that.
That's
Is that
more
correct?
That's more or less the point.
Okay.
Because I don't think there's anybody that's going to say advertise and then don't hire somebody. It's just a matter of when we hire that person. Mr. Shebel, you're done.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, sir. All right. So 8 and 10 are okay. Agenda item number 9 is the discussion of funding for Fred Transit for the fiscal year, actually 2012, 2013. And I don't know if it was just Mr. Parton and I, but we got a notice from the Fredericksburg city manager that basically said it wasn't cost-effective for Fred to provide service to Caroline on a limited basis. So if Caroline wanted Fred to still continue, we had to go back to the funding where we were last year, and that would be an additional $50,000 in our budget.
50 or 15?
I thought it was 50. I'm sorry.
Because it looks like
Yeah.
it's 15.
Because we have 90 in there. Thank you. I was looking at the 2010 numbers, because that's why they want us to go back up. So an additional 15,000, 15,500 and change. Right?
Well, I was going to say, if the discussion is that the board is interested in restoring funding, I think it might be prudent for me to talk with Mr. Cameron and get a better idea about what their expectation is for funding, so that we're not operating under one assumption and he's operating under another.
Yeah, if we give him 15 and he wants 30, that's a whole other story.
Right. This initial discussion, I was just trying to determine whether the board has interest in restoring funding, and if so, a ballpark of how much.
But the other thing is, I think we need to be able to have the leeway in order to negotiate and talk about routes. Because the last time, when we cut the money out, I think there were some routes that maybe one person was riding on it a day.
Right.
Sometime 3 a week. And that's, to me, is not cost-effective for the county. And I don't see that cost-effective for the freight bus transit either. So I think we have to be in the process of setting the routes that we want to serve in Caroline County. And I'll agree with the Y coming on. I don't mean to jump on you, but with the Y coming on, we need to have transportation for people to get from other parts of the county to the Y. So we may want to increase it.
Actually, I
Right,
wasn't
absolutely.
thinking the Y. I was thinking McKesson, which has 100 and some jobs, 150. There's probably
Yep.
going to be 100 available. We got to get people to those
absolutely.
jobs. So
I agree.
that's why I wanted it on the agenda, so we can make sure we address that. The Y is another good point. I think where we are now is we give Mr. Parton the authority to discuss with the city manager, or at least express to the city manager our ability to go back to the funding we had before, with the caveat that we get to discuss some of the routes. Okay? So let's have a motion to that effect for Mr. Parton.
So moved.
Okay, motion made by Mr. Akers, seconded by Mr. Underwood. Discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. That motion carries unanimously. So, Mr. Parton, you will talk to the city manager and the Fred folks, tell them that we are interested in restoring funding. We would like to discuss routes, considering some things we have in the county. And if they would like to be with us to discuss those, we'd be happy to have that.
Can you clarify how much restore funding to what level?
Well, that's what you want. We want you to make sure, but it looks like they're saying our budget's 90,000 and their request is 105. So it looks like it's only 15,000.
Didn't they say back to, I thought they gave us a date that they wanted to go back to. I don't see it here now.
No, I think the email was previous year funding. At the
It says for the past 2 years running, resulting in,
at the highest, we did 122. That was 09,
and I'm not sure that's not what they're looking at.
and
I think that may be. I need to clarify that, obviously, but he talks about cuts for the past 2 years
Right.
and
I
restoring.
think he's looking probably 2,000.
so it's either 15,000 or it's 30,000 to get us to 120. You'll clarify that? You clarify the route discussion we'd like to have and bring it back to us October? Okay. All right, thank you, gentlemen. That concludes our agenda. Oh, I'm sorry. County Administrator's Report.
Mr. Chairman, quickly, you have the regular update on the capital project expenditures. Be happy to answer any questions you may have or clarification on that. A few informational calendar items. Mr. Underwood has already mentioned the Dawn branch opening, a very nice facility that provides access to a lot of services that haven't been there in the past, and it's a very nice grand opening this past Saturday. We mentioned before the Caroline Pines 10th anniversary celebration is coming up this Friday at Caroline Promise, I'm sorry, I'm back to the other agenda item. This Friday at 6 p.m. here in the auditorium of the Community Services Center. That's open to the public. The Garden Club that we adopted a resolution for tonight for their 50th anniversary is holding a celebration on September 23rd at 6 o'clock at the Visitor Center. And we'll be presenting a gift to the board, or to the county through the board. We also, I guess we'll finalize the date for the October work session that you mentioned to also clarify some of the financial issues that came up tonight. How does the board want to?
Wait, before you leave that, repeat what Mrs. Hatcher said during the break about the money we're accounting for. I forgot it, so did you remember?
Yeah, and I think Ms. Hatcher can explain it as well. But I think what the problem was, we were talking about this $980,000 difference that how it came about, is the fact that during the auditing
That's what it is.
process, it does not allow you to use the money that's borrowed to offset the debt as revenue, but it requires you, in order to show the debt that you have encumbered,
Right.
to do what you want in the system. So that's the reason.
Is that the
she
right
was-
explanation? That's right?
You're required to record the expense.
Move to the mic just so the rest of the world will hear you.
You're required to record the expense, but there is no way to record the revenue
Right.
that offsets that expense. So it basically shows as a paper loss because the way the APA and the AICPA and GASB and GAP and all those other little acronyms that are out there want you to record an enterprise fund.
So again, it is not
So anybody saw
physically,
it? Right.
money-wise, it is strictly paper-wise, because we have the money on this hand to cover the debt over here, but the way that, as she's saying, the various organizations, auditing organizations require you to report, they do not allow you to report the money that you have sitting over here, which is borrowed, to offset the debt as a revenue source. So that's
Yeah.
what creates the gap, if you will.
In basic accounting terms, for every debit, there is a credit. In the general fund, your debit is to cash and the credit is to revenue. In an enterprise fund, your debit is to cash and your credit is to note payable, so there is no way to record the revenue.
And I'm like you, I just don't want anybody going in here tonight saying that the county utility system is.
Lost
Right, $900,000 and having to transfer money from the general fund to cover that. That is not, absolutely not true. It is strictly on the loan that and it's not that we're using money from the loan other than to pay the debt off.
We just should have done that exactly when you were giving your report, because I can see people who will tune in and hear that we lost $900,000 and cut the TV off. So let's hope they stayed for the whole program, or we'll make sure we get the rest of it out. Closing board comments, Mr. Underwood.
None, no, sir, none.
Mr. Popowitz,
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Seeley,
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Akers.
No, sir, I have none, thank you.
I just have a couple of administrative things. Email from Virginia, or a letter from Virginia Employment Commission, workforce survey, does that go to Mr. Wilson? Okay, he was waving his hand, so that goes to Mr. Wilson. And we've got some correspondence with VACO. I'm going to ask Mr. Parton to take care of that, if you would, please. And that would be it, so we will, thank you, have a motion for a closed meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move that this board convene in closed meeting pursuant to the consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff, exemption of section 2.2-3711.A.7 of the Code of Virginia, to discuss specific legal matters related to, number one, contract issues involving the Ladysmith Water Company; two, litigation filed against the county related to the Black Marsh Special Exception application; and number three, legal issues related to the Caroline Museum and Cultural Center. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Chairman, you got your motion second.
Motion made by Mr. Akers, second by Mr. Pappas. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. We will allow the audience to leave, and then we'll be in closed meeting. Motion to come out of closed session first.
So moved. Second.
Akers, Popowitz, first and second. However, unanimous. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Underwood, do you certify that only those things we went into closed session were discussed?
I so certify.
Mr. Popowitz, do you certify?
I so certify.
Mr. Seeley, do you certify?
I so certify.
Mr. Akers?
I so certify.
And I so certify. Okay, one action item is the termination of the lease on the museum with the Caroline County Museum and Cultural Center Board.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second? Motion made by Mr. Underwood, seconded by Mr. Akers. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Nay.
Mr. Underwood, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Popowitz, how do you vote?
I vote aye.
Mr. Seeley, how do you vote?
Nay.
Mr. Akers, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. Motion carries 4-1. That was the only action item out of closed session.
Mr. Chairman, I do have one other thing I'd like to ask the board about.
If you would.
Okay. If board members, several years ago, we asked the county employees to take a reduction in salary, 1% and 2%, based on the amount that they made. They went ahead and to help the county during the time when finances were tight and things were not looking too good for us, they went ahead and agreed. And there was not a lot of complaining and mumbling and grumbling about having to do it. They realized the need to do it. We've heard tonight that we have unencumbered balance, and I don't want to keep digging away at that, and I don't want us to think that is just a slush fund that we can go to. But I do believe it's important that we let our county employees know that now that we do have some extra funds, and that we have come out of this issue that we were in, I do believe we ought to let them benefit from the fact that they have worked hard continuously and have not complained and not grumbled about having to do more for less. And I would encourage this board to reinstate the amounts that we asked them to take a reduction in the salary, 1% if you made $40,000 and above, and 2% if you made below $40,000 a year. And so I would ask the board to do that, and in fact, if we can make it effective December 1, I just believe it's important that happens, and I would make a motion that we do reinstate the reductions that we gave county employees several years ago, be reinstated effective December 1st, 2011.
That requires a budget amendment, though, doesn't it?
Excuse me?
That'll require a budget amendment, though, doesn't it?
It probably would.
It will.
Yeah,
Okay.
it probably
It
will.
will.
Yeah, it probably will.
And we
But I
also,
think we have to approve doing it, then they will come back with a budget amendment.
why don't,
I'm sorry?
We also gave bonuses based on the reduction.
We gave a $1,000 bonus, you're absolutely correct, last year, we did that. And in some cases, it helped the employees, but in some cases, it did not even come close to what they had taken
Okay.
reduction.
board members have, I don't know if you recall, but there was an email that came out from Mr. Parton on this specific subject, and I don't remember the cost.
It was about, I think it's about $132,000 a year. That is
I thought
close
it
to,
was
I'm sorry? Yeah, I think it's
So
about
it's what?
130.
I thought it was 96,000.
What did you think it was?
I thought it was in the 300 range.
Oh, no.
Okay. Can we, Mr. Akers, I would concur with your motion. I would just like to, can we have that number?
Sure.
At our next board meeting?
That's fine.
And we'll put that on our agenda? Yeah, but we'll do it on the next agenda. Sure. And as you mentioned that, I was contacted from some landfill folks. Remember, we had to go through an extra step of giving them the bonus in June?
Yes.
Yep.
Well, they told me that they didn't get a bonus in December.
No, they didn't.
No.
So they're actually behind a bonus. You know, they never got one in December, and it's nobody's fault. What happened was everybody who took a reduction,
They didn't
the
take
1 or 2%,
Because they could, because they're minimum, some of them are.
their minimum wage, but they did take a reduction because we closed the landfill a day.
Right.
So theoretically, a lot of them
They
took a
did take a
20% reduction. So as you put this together, that's why I'd like you to put that in there too, so we can kind of catch everybody up.
Because
Now,
those folks won't appreciate any change in salary even if this gets done.
they won't get
No.
any change in salary.
Exactly, that's my point.
And
is-
their salary is purely based on
Hours.
hours worked.
Yes.
And by reducing the hours 1/7, what's that, 16%? Almost. Something like that. They're taking a 16% pay cut each time.
Yep.
15 and a half. So factor that in so we can see. Okay? Anything else we want to
I
do
mean,
tonight?
Is this something that the board really doesn't want to do?
Well, we're not totally out of the
Huh?
financial woods yet.
I was gonna say, what I don't wanna do is put anybody at risk later in the year if the budget forecast isn't good. Then what? I mean, if things do not get better, if they continue on the course that they're on or slide backwards. What I don't wanna be faced with having to lay somebody off because we've given everybody the money back, because what I've heard from employees is if it's going to keep us all employed, that's their primary concern.
Sure, I understand. And my thoughts are, if you determine that in later months, come June, July, August, then you go back to the reduction again. I mean, to me, layoffs is the very last thing we want to consider to do. We never want to do anything when it comes to layoffs. Again, it was not an easy choice. It was not an easy process the last time around, and I certainly don't want to go through that again. And so I think we need to look at whatever needs to be done as far as reductions. I'm just saying, the employees in Caroline County, you see neighboring counties giving increases, and they didn't take reductions. Our employees, I'm sorry?
School board gave raises and bonuses.
Right, and I'm saying that our people, they have worked hard for us, for the people of this county, and having much less money. You take a person making $40,000 a year, and you take 2% from them, that's a pretty sizable amount of money. And so, but they didn't complain, and you didn't see people exiting the doors and going to other places. They've stayed with Caroline County. And I just think it's important that we show them that, hey, you are appreciated. And I think by giving back the increase, the reductions that we took, will go a long way in helping morale, because morale is not the greatest. I mean, there's no sense in us denying that. That's not the greatest.
That's a good point, and we also didn't factor in that the furlough days
Or additional.
that they took because of that, and those furlough days are in addition to the thing. So I mean, it's all we're all for making sure that our employees are rewarded accordingly for their hard work. I understand the other perspective of let's make sure we can afford it. We're not, like I say, out of the financial woods yet. I'm going to ask Mr. Parton to give us a thorough analysis like the email we have or had before, plus the other folks, and make sure, and we'll discuss this again at our next board meeting, okay, with probably a little fresher minds. All right?
Sounds good.
That being said, is there please a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I made a motion. I withdraw.
He withdrew his motion. Mr. Popowitz made the motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.